Guys, welcome to the First Responder Playbook. It's my pleasure to have Dan Fraser with me tonight. I've met Dan at the ILEADA conference in St. Louis. I usually try to let everybody introduce themselves because I don't do them justice. Dan, introduce yourself to my audience.
Oh man, this you put me on the spot here of introducing myself. Well, I'll keep it quick because we want to get some valuable conversation here. But yeah, I'm coming to you from Calgary, Alberta, which is up in Canada. I started off real young, like 17 years old. I was a reservist in the military, and then got hired real young as a police officer as well, 22 years old, and with the Calgary Police Service. And I was a typical guy. I wanted to be like a SWAT guy kind of thing and do those kind of things. And then when I got into into training, I realized that these guys that teach all the tactics training and stuff, they were blowing my mind with their knowledge, with the why behind everything that they did. And I thought, you know what, I want to be like these guys. And so I kind of angled my whole career that way. It was mostly in patrol, but I spent about 20 years in our kind of our riot unit. They don't call it that anymore, but public safety unit, and doing specialty munition stuff, and just kind of collecting up instructor certifications, and then was able eventually to become a full-time instructor in our academy. We run our own academy in Calgary. There's about 2,300 officers, sworn officers, then about another 1,000 civilians. So it's one of the bigger municipal agencies. And I got to teach tactics every day for 6 years, and it was just awesome. And then went back to patrol and had some different other roles, but mostly staying in patrol, in training, etc. And when I left training, that's when a couple of other instructors pulled me aside and they said, "Hey, would you put together a course on how to actually teach? That's what you need to do." And I thought, oh, okay, well, I'm doing something right, I guess. And that one little comment has just sent my life on a different trajectory over the last 15 years, to really look at, like, okay, what makes a good instructor? And what I found a lot was is a lot of people telling you what to do, but not how to do it. They go, you know what you got to do, Brent? You got to be dynamic. You got to wow your audience. You got to bring them in. And you go, oh, okay, this is wonderful. How do you actually do that? And so I really want to make sure that with the stuff that I'm doing, that I'm eating my own dog food, first of all, and secondly, that I'm, if I can't hold your hand and walk you down the path of where we're going, at least I can give you some real solid examples to help you to be better. And that's really been my focus. Is instructor development. It led me to start my own consulting company. Then I left the Calgary Police Service in just around COVID time, and I went into the private sector. Terrible time to do that, by the way, especially when it came to training. But such is life. It gave me time to write a book. So I'm the author of Kickass Presentations, and since then, I've just had a lot of really great opportunities. So now I work with a guy by the name of Chris Butler. We're talking about smart people in law enforcement. He's the smartest, if not one of the smartest people in law enforcement training and use of force. I work for him in a company called Raptor Protection, and we teach a course called Methods of Instruction, which is all about the human factors of training use of force. That's a very sought after course. And then I work with Ken Murray, one of the co-founders of Simunition, teaching training at the speed of life course. And then I've got my own stuff. So super busy doing the training stuff, which is awesome. And then I decided, well, I'm not done with policing. I felt like I escaped my career with only one ex-wife, a bad back, and sleep apnea. And I thought, no, I'm gonna jump back in here. So I was able to join our national police department, which is called the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or the RCMP, and they let me work part-time. And so I pick and choose where and when I work, and it allows me to work sometimes close to home here in Calgary, but I'll also do stints all over the province and even up into the Arctic. So I'm living the dream. I'm traveling all over the place and doing lots of instructor development type stuff, and then still keeping my hand in the actual day-to-day of first responder policing. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Now, I gotta say, as an Oklahoma kid from the 90s, the reason I knew where Calgary, Alberta was is the Hart Foundation. Bret Hart, Owen Hart.
Yes, exactly. Well, our junior hockey team is called the Hitmen, just because of that. You know, Bret the Hitman Hart and
Yep.
Stampede Wrestling and that kind of stuff. Yeah, most people know Calgary. Some will know it because of that. Some will know it because of we're close to the national park called Banff, which is about an hour away. And then we, excuse me, we host the largest, or they call it the greatest outdoor show on earth. It's a mega huge rodeo and that kind of thing, called the Calgary Stampede. And that's every summer. And that draws about 1 million people through the gates over the course of 10 days. And the whole city kind of shuts down for that. And, you know, if you show up to work and you're not drunk, they send you home. It's a big party. You know, it's cool to see everybody, people from all walks of life, you know, getting into the Western spirit and wearing cowboy hats and cowboy boots and doing the country music thing. And it's pretty awesome.
That's awesome. So let me ask you this: you get on when you got on at Calgary at the municipal PD, did they have their own academy then?
They did. Yeah. Yeah. They're putting through, you know, between 100 and maybe 200 and, you know, 40-ish, 250 at the max kind of cadets a year. So yeah, they run their own academy, um, which is, yeah, which is nice. It allows them to be nimble enough to make change. And they, excuse me, I know we had to cancel this
Yeah.
recording like whatever a couple weeks ago. I'm still got this weird lingering cough from that. So yeah, run our own academy here in Calgary, and it's nice because they're it's still small enough to be nimble. Meaning that when I was the Taser master instructor, you know, I had the Taser portfolio, I had the strategic communications, so kind of de-escalation portfolio, and some other ones, some mental preparation and conditioning. If I saw something that I went, you know what, this needs to be brought into our training, I had really hardly anybody to ask. I would kind of run it by my own supervisor and the rest of the unit, and if it kind of made sense, legally, medically, and all these other ways, we'd go, okay, let's make the change. And in that respect, we were able to kind of really innovate and stay ahead of, I think, you know, the rest of North America in a way. And I've seen that now going around and training other agencies. One of the things that they lament all the time is, man, we wish we could do this or we wish we could do that, but there's so many hoops to jump through and so much red tape. And it really, who gets held back is the officers, and who suffers is the officers and the public ultimately.
Absolutely. How long were you on the job before you realized training was the direction you wanted to go?
Like I said, I was excuse me, in the academy. And I was doing my degree in criminal justice in university, and I had this very forward thinking professor out at the University of the Fraser Valley in British Columbia named Terry Anderson. And he put us through this program in one of his classes called Living on Purpose. And what you did is you went through a whole series of exercises over the course of months to kind of narrow down what it is what's your real purpose here. And mine was that I'm a dedicated wisdom seeker, and my mission in life, my goal is to empower others. So I really started looking at my own life about how can I collect gems of wisdom and then pass them on to other people to empower them. And when I really thought about it, could I have, you know, angled my career to be like a full-time SWAT type of guy? I could have, but man, when I saw the quality of instruction that I was getting, I thought I want to be one of those guys. So it was like right away, I wanted to angle my career towards that.
That's awesome. Is up there, is there like in Oklahoma, we have to have 2 years on before you can become like what they call a basic instructor, and then you go through a 40-hour class, and then you can kind of teach like basic subjects, and if you want to get into defensive tactics or firearms, they have a whole separate certification for that. Is it similar to that up there?
Yeah, very similar. yeah, you would take once you have usually a couple of years on for sure. Yeah, same thing. You spend your time, doing control tactics, annual research, all the stuff that nobody wants to do, right? Because you got a bunch of senior people who come in and they don't want to spend the day on the mats. And back then we ran through everything in the PPCT playbook, from ground fighting to knife defense to cranial pressure points to you name it, in a day, and for detectives and for everybody, people who, they barely knew where their duty belt was, and they had to
Right.
run through all that. And so that's where you really cut your teeth. Not just teaching the stuff, but teaching the stuff to people who either don't care, or think they already know it, which is really difficult. And thankfully, they've come a long way in Calgary Police now. They very much tailor the annual type of training to what work area you're in, because why put through a bunch of undercover people through what the uniforms are going through when it doesn't apply to their job? Yeah, just slowly collecting up different instructor certifications, and then being the bane of my supervisor's existence by going, hey, they need me to teach. They need me to, come and be a quarry, like be a role player for this, or teach this course, or go on another course. And so, yeah, a lot of time away from the street, but it's got to be done.
That's awesome. When did you finally start realizing that like maybe there was other ways of like conveying your message and like learning about those advanced instructional methods? Like when did that finally start playing in, and how did you get involved in that?
Yeah, and I don't know if there is really advanced stuff. Um, I think, like everybody, whether you think of starting out as a police officer and you've got your officer coach and your first field training officer, and you go, there's a bunch of stuff that they're doing that I'd like. I'm going to grab that. This other stuff, it's not for me, or I can't do that. So I'm going to find somebody else. And the same thing with instructors. I think you just take bits and pieces from everybody. There's certain things that I mix a lot of humor into what I do. And in fact, in my book, I talk about, I've got a chapter, and it's part of the course that I run, called "You've Got to Be Joking," which is really, how do we use humor to engage people? Some instructors immediately look at that and go, I'm not funny. I can't do that stuff. And you know what? I bet they are funny. It's just a matter of tying into that. Like maybe it's real dry dad jokes or something like that. Let's bring that out so that you can do some of this stuff. So I really like showing people what is possible as far as instruction, and realizing that everybody's on this journey. Like everybody's on a path, and I hope to be a better instructor next year than I am this year, and even better the year after that. So I think it's just about continual learning, and really looking at it from your students' perspective and going, what do they want? What do they need? And let's get to that stuff immediately.
I love that. That's actually like a very good way of like saying that, because you're right. I mean, if your students aren't catching what you're saying, then you're not really doing them a service, you know?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's one of the things that I'm like always on now is, what is training? Like, what is the goal of this whole thing? And it's something that I open a lot of my presentations with, when I speak at conferences and whatnot. And you have a room full of. I was just down in Indianapolis for the NAFTO conference. You have a room full of 200 trainers, and people are going, what is the goal of training? Like, is to make people better? Yeah, but is that really the goal? Uh, the way that I look at it is, we want to change behavior. If you're not changing people's behavior, if they're not going out into the field and doing something different than they did before that is more effective, then it's kind of a waste. In the research literature, that is called retention and transfer, meaning you have to have your students retain what you're teaching. It doesn't matter if it's legal stuff, book knowledge, or whether, excuse me, it's a some kind of control tactics type of thing. If they can't remember how to do it, they have no chance of actually performing it later. So there's retention. And then the second is transfer. We want to be able to have them transfer that knowledge, that skill, whatever it is, into an operational environment where they can actually use it. And one of the studies I love to go back to was done by Force Science by doctors John and Dawn O'Neill, their husband and wife team. They went and looked at a bunch of different three major academies really in the United States, and they looked at what was being taught, how it was being taught, etc. And there's a bunch of facets to what they were doing, but ultimately what they found was that there was very little retention and therefore very little transfer of a lot of things. So when they looked at some basic stuff like applying a cranial pressure point, those basics really only lasted about 6 weeks with their students. They brought the students back in at different intervals and said, hey, here's a person that needs this, go ahead and do that. And they're looking at the academy's own checklist for what makes this effective, and they were ineffective after only 6 weeks. And when they looked at advanced stuff or more complex skills, like let's say a weapon takeaway, right? Somebody's got a gun in your back, how are you going to deal with that? 2 weeks, and it was not even functional anymore. So here we have these students graduating from their academy, unable to perform already at graduation a lot of the stuff that they've actually learned. So it's a big problem, I think, in law enforcement. And so that's one thing that I'm on all the time is like, we need to be looking at what we're teaching. We need to be conducting not just retention tests, meaning can they remember what to do, but a transfer test. So let some time elapse, and then let's give them let's test them. Let's see if they actually are picking this up. And if they're not, then we need to look at ourselves as trainers, not as them as students, that, hey, you can't do this. I was teaching high-risk vehicle stops one day in our academy, and that involved this prone handcuffing. So you have somebody on the ground, we teach a technique for prone handcuffing. Well, these students are fumbling through this and having a hard time. And I remember one of the other instructors going, we taught you this. How come you can't remember this? Well, if everybody's unable to remember that, we got to look back at how this is being taught. And it turns out, yeah, they hadn't seen it in months. We taught it in a blocked fashion where they got a whole bunch of handcuffing early in their training, and then we leave it for a number of months. Then we throw them into a more dynamic and realistic type of environment, and no wonder they're not able to perform it. So I'm really fascinated by that, and how do we get the most out of our students from the training that we deliver. And that's kind of changed my outlook at pretty much everything that I do as far as training goes.
That's awesome. I feel like a lot of times, especially in the basic academy, they teach you to the bare basics and they don't want to go beyond that. And so I feel like you're right that there's no really them trying to make you apply it later on, say, hey, show this to us, show us how it's working. It's just, hey, we're going to get you through the academy. Good luck moving forward.
Right. Can you pass the test? We put a check in the box, we move you on, and we see it like certainly in firearms training. This is one of the things that I'm, just preaching all the time, is that we spend all this time on a flat range, no realistic context. If you think about what's the cue for you when you're out in the field, what is the cue to let you know that somebody needs shooting? Well, they're pulling a gun, they're pulling a knife, they're doing these they're posing a deadly force threat. But in most of our training, what's the cue? It's a target turning on a range, or you're already looking at the target, which doesn't have a gun on it, and it's an instructor blowing a whistle or yelling something, or a shot timer or something like that. And as soon as we go live fire, we start to cut a lot of the golden threads that we can bring in from the real world. So we do a bunch of this shooting and punching holes in paper. We pat ourselves on the back. And then we do a couple of scenarios where we bring in some non-lethal training type ammo, whether it's, simunition FX marking cartridges or airsoft or whatever it is. We do a couple scenarios and we go, oh, right on, you got this, and out you go. And really, we're grabbing the stick by the wrong end. If this is like training for an MMA fight and we spend 90% of the time hitting the heavy bag, getting really good at that, we have a couple of light sparring sessions and we say, yeah, you're good to go. So I think we have a long way to go in law enforcement training in general to be able to really prepare our students for what they're about to face in the real world.
Yeah, I agree. We actually just started a mandatory like night shoot with like some dynamic shooting and stuff at night last year at our agency. And you would have thought that like, we kicked somebody's dog. They were like, well, we got to go out there at night and we got to do this and this and this. And um,
Exactly.
because cops get in such a routine of, well, this is the way we always do things. Like,
Oh
I want
yeah.
to get my minimum hours with training in a year. And, they don't want to do any more than that. They don't want to do more than their 2 quals a year. And I'll be honest, I was like, man, do I really want to do this? This is like August in Oklahoma. It's like a furnace outside. And, then I got out there and I went through it and I'm like, man, that instructor was really good. And, I'll be honest, totally went in there with a bad, like, I don't want to do this. And then I went through it and I was like, it was actually a really good class. Like I learned some things. And because he started off, he's like, hey, I know it's hot out here. I know y'all don't want to be out here. This is why it's important. And I'll never forget, he had a like piece of cardboard that he wrote in marker what the statistics of why this is important. And I never had seen that before in such a unique way of presenting it, that it stood out and stood in my head of like, man, okay, like, it was just you don't see that. Like, you don't see somebody writing on a piece of cardboard.
Yeah.
And, but he did it in a way and he explained it in a way that it stuck, and I was like, "Okay, I see the benefit of this." And, we've got 150 officers, and I would say a good 75% afterwards were like, "Hey, that was actually a really good class." And it just took presenting it in a different manner at a different time of day and switching it up from just shooting paper, and,
100%.
it ended up being well received.
Yeah, and that instructor motivation, excuse me, to do that is super important because especially with in-service training, you know what the training's probably going to be like before you go because everybody talks and
Yes.
they go, "Oh yeah, Brent, you did the training. I'm going next month. Like, what was it like?" And if you have people coming back going, "Actually, it was really good. We did some cool stuff. I made me think in a different way, and it was actually they made the training fun." Oh my god, they made police training fun. Like, God forbid. Yeah, everybody else wants to go, and then next year when you got to go again, you'll be going, yeah, this is I'm ready for it, right? So
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
So let me ask you, I have something that I got to say to my audience, and I think I've never been a strong writer. You gave me the most impactful way of writing when you're like, hey, write it like this and write it this way. And it stood out to me because you made it so relatable. How did you get into being a good writer? And how did you even get in that path in the first place?
Wow, that's a great question. I think writing for me probably came from someone who I really consider a mentor, a guy named Brian Willis. So as you may know, he's the deputy director of ILEADA, the conference and the organization that we're involved with. And I was fortunate enough to have him as my head of tactics training when I went through the academy. And he's the one that really brought ILEADA into the Calgary Police Service. And he was one of those guys that was writing articles and writing books. And fairly early in my career, he approached me about writing something for one of the writing a chapter for one of the books he was doing. And I realized that the quality of our ideas, if we want to express things really well with high quality, you need to be able to write them well and explain them well. And led me to just start putting things in writing and going, hey, is this valuable? And then writing articles for various law enforcement magazines and journals and those kind of things. And has really, I think, served me well in my career, even in writing reports. I was kind of a stickler for writing, and I would have when I became a new sergeant, I would have some officers, I would send them some feedback on a report, and they'd go, "What are you doing? I've been on the job for 5 years or 10 years. I've never had a supervisor send a report back like this is." I'm going, "Hey, if you want to be better, there's a way that we can make your reports better and everything you write better, because that's going to reflect on you. It's going to go into places where you don't even know, like who's going to pick up this report that you're reading. You don't want to get a terrible reputation, let's say with with the Crown prosecutor, knowing that when they see your Brent, this guy's writing's terrible. Probably his fieldcraft is terrible. Probably his testimony is going to be terrible, or you can have it go the other way." So, it's something I took an interest in fairly early, and then I was very fortunate with the I Lead a Journal to be able to come on as one of the section editors there. And I'll give people feedback if they want feedback. I'm not one of those guys that goes around saying, "Hey, here's what you got to do," because often it's not received well. Even though I kind of look at stuff as this is feed forward, like, hey, whatever was before, that's fine, but how can we be better in the future? And I was really encouraged, Brent, when I half expected an email or nothing to come back, or for you to come back and with some kind of angry retort, like and you didn't. You said, "Hey, this is great feedback," and then you actually did the thing, and you turned around and you submitted something that was like, "Was this the same person writing this stuff?" Because it was two totally different writing styles, and you went from a very sort of a clinical, I want to say like a dry way of writing, which a lot of people do, into something where you started off with a personal story and something that grabs people that they actually want to read. And there's some actual takeaways there where they go, "After I read this, what do I do differently? Or what's the feeling? What's the thing I want the audience to think, feel, know, or do when they're done reading this?" And you grasped onto that right away. And so I'm proud of you. It was very cool.
It was definitely coming out of my comfort zone. I'll give you that. And so I appreciate it wholeheartedly. But I'm going to segue this into my next topic
All right.
of I was at ILETA and it just hit me. I literally was fixing to go to bed and I was sitting there watching TV. My roommate was asleep and I was like, I know what I want to write about. And it hit me. And I literally knocked that out in 45 minutes. And, I was like, man, ILETA's really got my, creative juices flowing this week. And I heard somebody mention it this year, and it made a lot of sense of ILETA recharges my batteries.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget the first year I went 2023, we had never sent anybody up there to it. And my now boss, my training coordinator, was like, "Hey, there's a couple of us going. Would you be interested in going?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like a blast." Didn't know anything about the organization. I was like, "Yeah, if
Sure.
our agency's blessed enough to send us to out of state training per year." And I was like, "Yeah, why not?" And I'll never forget, they sent me with nothing but admin. I was the only patrolman, and I had a blast. But I went up there and we signed up late and we stayed off site. And so I had fun, but I didn't network. And so, once you get back to your hotel, you're like, do I really want to go back over there? I got to pay for parking. And
100%.
I
Yep.
didn't get the full experience. And so I was like, next time I'm going to go. Like, I want on site. And what's funny is this year we signed up to go and I put in December. Well, Trump came back in office in January and there was a bunch of grants that were put on hold. Well, as a tribal agency, those were frozen real quickly. And so there was like a budget freeze for us for like a month and a half just to see how everything was going to play out. Totally understandable. Well, I didn't get my stuff done in time and like the hotel like filled up.
It
And
does. Yep.
yeah, and I was like, man, I'm not gonna get to stay inside again. And I just happened to check like a week and a half before, and they had an opening for us, and they got us in, and it was I don't want to say better experience because I had a blast the first time, but
Sure.
such a different experience of being on site and like getting to participate in everything every night. And that's what I want you to talk about is just why iLead is so awesome and how people can benefit from just getting involved.
Well, yeah, I mean, if I went for the first time in 2012, and immediately I go, these are my people. This is the place I need to be. I just loved being around so many instructors, people who are experts in all kinds of areas, and everybody along the pathway in some way, and everybody's just trying to get better and learn off of each other. And like you said, there's the networking part of it. What I have found is even more than just collecting up a bunch of business cards or that kind of thing is developing relationships. And that has served me so well in my law enforcement career because you get talking around the lunchroom or whatever, and somebody's asking about some training thing or some new piece of equipment. And I became the go-to person for that because I might not know, but if I don't, I know a guy. And if I don't know a guy, I know a guy who knows a guy because there's such an incredible network of really passionate instructors there. And it was important enough to me that I didn't want to wait for my agency to give me the time or give me the money. So every year that I've been, I think there's 1 year where my department paid for me to go. The rest of the time, this is on my own time, my own dime, and totally worthwhile because you need to take time to stop and sharpen the saw. You can't just be doing the work all the time. And that's what I find ILEADA is. It's a week to get together with other great instructors, to have a lot of fun, and just to the learning. As you know, Brent, is like drinking from a fire hose. There's so much good stuff there that it's really hard to take it all in at the time. And there's so much going on that you can stay on whatever track you're on. If you really like doing, putting your hands on people in the dojo, you can do that all day, every day for a week. If you want to be shooting, if you want to be learning about de-escalation, if you want to be learning about instructor development, like there's so many good things there. And it's a peer organization. Nobody's paid to speak. Everybody's on the same level. It was one of the first years that I was there. I had a guy named Chuck Remsburg sitting in the front row of my class. Now, he wrote a 3-part series of books that I had because my dad was a cop. And he wrote a book called Tactics for Street Patrol that it published in like 1982. And I'm going, this guy is, I have no business having a conversation with this guy. And he's sitting in my class. So that's been one of those really, really cool things, just to see everybody there is trying to learn off of everybody else. It's just such a great experience. And yeah, staying at the host hotel really helps because there's so much good stuff that goes on outside of the actual sessions, right? In the hallways, there's the conversations in between sessions and at nighttime. And I mean, there's activities and stuff every night, but there's the opportunity to just hang out and meet people and have some really great conversations and move the ball forward in whatever you're trying to do in your own agency.
I'll just say this: I will be back to defend my third place in the world cornhole position next year, and we're going for the number
Third
one
place.
spot.
Well,
Yeah,
that's a
I
big
got carried to
tournament there.
third
So
place,
good for
but
you.
I got carried. But hey, I'm going to make sure he's there next year. But it was awesome because there's so many different things that you can learn. That's actually I don't know if you've seen a couple of my videos with David Valacing. I met David at the conference this year, and he was there teaching de-escalation. And it's just
He was.
again,
Yeah.
kind of like you and Jeff, such a great mind on just like police work, and like I could always pick his brain for great topics. And I would have never done that without being there. And
100%. Yep.
I think that I've tried so hard this year, especially now that I'm in training full time, to come back and implement some of the ideas that I learned up there and implement new things. My boss went through, I guess there was a Milo class about reality based firearms qualifications, and we're actually working that out on trying to implement some of that with like de-escalation stuff this year. And
Nice.
because we went up there and it's you practice what you preach. You go up there and you learn something new and bring it back to your agency. And I like I said, it was just a happenstance that I even ever found out about it, but I'm so glad that I did, because it's just such a different atmosphere. You're not there to go have a week-long vacation. You're there to go learn and have fun. Like it's you're not there just to go blow the week off and say, yeah, I went to training for a week. I might have hit
Yep.
5 minutes of class. And it's just and not to mention the host sites, the Union Station Hotel is just so unique and awesome, and big, that it makes for such a fun atmosphere. I went in the ginormous Ferris wheel this year by myself. Probably would never do
Oh,
that again
nice.
by myself, but it was still a cool experience, And I really, like I said, if anybody looks up ILETA, it's ILEETA, guys, not FBI LETA. They're a little bit different organization. But if they look it up, there's just so much, just even if you join as a member of, the journals, the articles, all the different, the Facebook group, the LinkedIn group, there's so many ways to like get this knowledge out there and then have the conference on top of it. It's well worth it.
Yeah, it's changed my life, absolutely. And the I can't think of how many people that I have developed really great relationships with over the years because of Ileta. And then every year that I go, man, it's like a family reunion there every year. Even during 2020, they closed it down because of COVID. Nobody went. The following year in 2021, they held the conference, but they wouldn't let Canadians in. So we had a night where all the Canadians were on, or I shouldn't say all the Canadians, but a number of us were on like a Zoom call, and they brought it into the main sort of bar area there at the entrance, and people just took turns coming by and having a drink with us and having a chat over Zoom. And yeah, you don't get that with too many other organizations. So I can't say enough good things about it. Yeah, if you're out there
Well,
and you're sitting there thinking, oh, maybe I should go, maybe I shouldn't. They asked me for a quote a couple of years ago about if you had to say something about ILETA, and I said, sell a kidney if you must, but get to this conference. Put money away. Yeah, it's not necessarily free or cheap, but if you got to pay your own way, like get there, it will be worth your while.
and I think we end up winning 3 or 4 different memberships, as either through winning getting a place in the cornhole tournament, or they won them through the giveaways. And our agency blesses us that they send us to one out of state training per year, so they pay for ours completely. And what we actually have done is donated the 3 memberships we won to officers in Oklahoma,
Nice.
so that way they can at least join the organization. And then if they decide to come to the conference, even better. But at least they have access to the journals, the networking stuff. And so um, we're just trying to spread the good word of ILETA in Oklahoma. Um,
It's awesome.
Unfortunately, I'm a big college football fan. We had some Norman PD guys in there, University of Oklahoma. I won't hold it against them, but they were awesome. Um, I want you to touch on one more thing, and I did not get to experience this year, unfortunately, because by the time I got there, it was totally packed, and I got to watch the recording of it. But I feel like it's not the same. And next year, I'm going to make sure I get there early. The Emerson Hour.
Yes. Yeah. The Emerson Hour is something that was brought in by Brian Willis, who's the deputy executive director there. Ralph Waldo Emerson famously would ask friends of his when he would see them, what has become clear to you since we last met? And he thought that would be such a fitting question for certain people to ask. So he started a thing called the Emerson Hour, where he would pick 6 speakers. He gives them about 6 months notice and before the conference, and then at the conference, There's going to be the Monday night Emerson Hour, and nobody knows who these speakers are. Nobody knows what the topics are going to be. And the idea is you get up there, you've got 9 minutes with no slides. It's you and a microphone, and answer that question. What has become clear to you since we last met or since the last conference? And man, what an impactful time that is. It's funny how every year themes kind of come up, but really people really speak from the heart, and it adds another nice layer of depth to the ILETA family, the conference itself. So I was selected to speak there in 2019, and I'll tell you, that's a stressful kind of thing. It was Joe Willis running it at the time. And when he called me and said, "Hey, would you be a speaker?" I thought, okay. And then I tell you what, that 9 minutes that you need to spend in front of your peers click-clacked around in my brain like that little ball in a paint can for 6 months. And I'm making notes on my phone, and I'm trying to, yeah, it's, hey, you want me to speak for a day in front of people, even an hour with a PowerPoint? No problem, man. 9 minutes, no notes, no nothing. That was a challenge, and really trying to bring value to everybody who's in the room. So people put a ton of work into that, and yeah, it's one of my favorites, and a no miss event at the conference every year.
Next year, I'm definitely getting there early, because when I got there this year, it was packed. Like, the room was full, and I was like, "Well, there's no room in there. I'm not squeezing in there." So next year, I'm getting there early for
Get
that
there early.
reason.
Yep.
So
Yep.
there's always something I can learn to do better next time at the conference. Next year, I'm getting there early for the Emerson Hour. I know that fact.
Yeah, good
So
stuff.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah, go.
Raptor Protection. You're doing the instruction methods of instruction class.
Yeah.
What is the methods of instruction class? Because that just sounds so intriguing to me.
Yeah, you know what? It's maybe not Chris Butler, who developed this, and we talk about this a lot. It's maybe not the best name, but it's gained so much traction now that people know methods of instruction. They know MOI, the abbreviation. So really, what it's looking at is, how do people learn? How do people especially learn motor skills? And how do we teach motor skills for retention and transfer, especially during life-threatening events? So it's aimed primarily at firearms and control tactics instructors, but quite often we have academic instructors, we have driving instructors, we have curriculum designers, everybody involved in training. And it's really looking at what is the threat environment first that officers are going to face out there. And are we really preparing officers for what they're actually likely to encounter? So, for example, if you look at the FBI statistics about the distances at which officers get attacked, it's not the same ranges that we're using on a live fire range. Like, it's close, right? The most dangerous time for a police officer is that moment of first touch, when we go to put our hands on somebody and they realize, oh, this is real, and they launch an attack from there. And so we look at what the reality is of all of these kind of things, and then how can we angle our training towards that? And we're not telling officers, here's what you need to do, ABC. We don't really know what you teach or how you teach it, but you know your stuff very well. And how can we start bringing real world context into the training that you have to develop better retention and transfer? So you were talking earlier about having to shoot at night, and officers going, "What? We're shooting at night?" Yeah, low light is a really big part of policing. It's
Yes.
statistically like 50% or more of the arrests and use of force stuff that we get into is during hours of darkness. So why isn't our training reflecting that? So I had we were training a group of conservation officers from the province of Manitoba, and some of them had been on the course 6 months earlier, and they said, "Here's all the stuff that we did to bring in some real world stuff and to apply your course." And one of the things they did is they have conservation officers who are not there full time. They kind of come on during the summer months. They work with the full time people, and they're running through the couple of weeks of training that they have for them. And one of the first things they said is, okay, there's a person in this room. There's no lights on in there. And they go, yep, go in and arrest this person. And so they got their flashlight in their hand and they're going, yeah, but it's dark. And the instructors are going, yeah. Okay, well, how am I supposed to do this? Like, I've got my flashlight in my hand and I need to handcuff. It's like, hey, figure it out. And so they go through and they do it, and they realize, oh yeah, this is something that we haven't really practiced before. I had to sort of muddle my way through and figure out the best way. And all the students after went, wow, like we've never been kind of challenged like that with something so simple. And so what we do is really expose the real world context of the threat environment that officers are likely to face. And then we look at all of the human factors that, and really human factors, it sounds fancy, but it's what capabilities and limitations do humans have? How do our eyes work? How does our brain function for decision making under life-threatening stress? How does our memory work? And how do we tie all this into training so that we're giving our officers the very best we can? What you hear from trainers all the time is we need more time. We need more time. And the reality is we're not getting more time. We all know that, right? It's not going to happen. So how do we use the time that we actually have constructively to get the best out of our students, to prepare them for those really high stress, high consequence, rapidly evolving, violent encounters that they're going to be involved in? How do we best do that for them? And really looking at it through the lens of it being informed by research. And so we will touch on or reference over 150 peer-reviewed studies. And the reality is that there's been more research in human factors in police use of force in the last 8 years than there were in the history of the world before that. So whatever you were doing 20 years ago, some of it might be relevant, but I bet you there's a bunch of stuff that you didn't know. And there's all kinds of incredible research going on all over the world, not just by companies like Force Science Institute, but all over Europe. And we kind of distill all that down and we hand it to instructors on a silver platter and go, here's a way that you can understand this research. And now that we challenge you in the class, how do you implement this? What are you going to do differently when you leave here? So what are your takeaways? And more importantly, what are your action items? What are you going to do when you leave? Because again, it's retention and transfer. You might not remember all this, so the manual is pretty thick. You can go back to it later, but more importantly, what are you going to do differently as a trainer? And that's the most encouraging thing for me, is to hear back from trainers who took the 5-day course and they go, here's what I did and here's the results that we're getting. And it's really kind of moving the needle in law enforcement training to just, hey, here's the way we've always done it. We don't really know why. As you probably have experienced, often when you become a trainer, you get the big manual, right? You get the binder. Here you go. Maybe it's on a flash drive now, but here's all the big book of learning, and you go, oh, okay. And you teach what they told you, but is it valid? Has it been validated? Why do we teach it this way? Is there a better way to do that? And so we really challenge a lot of very strongly held notions that instructors come with, and stuff that, that Chris and I have been parroting sometimes for years, where we realize this isn't true anymore. So it's very confronting for a lot of instructors. They come on the course, and sometimes during the first couple of days, there's a lot of side-eyeing their other instructors, going, are these guys full of it? Or have I been fed a line throughout my instructor development in my career? But we have a lot of discussion. We really dig into these, all of these issues, look at it from a research perspective, and go, is there evidence to support this or not? And is that evidence valid? Is it in the law enforcement domain, or is it in, maybe it's in some other adjacent domain that we can map onto what we're doing in law enforcement? So it's just such an incredible learning experience for the instructors that take it. So yeah, I encourage anybody to have a look into that program, the methods of instruction from Raptor Protection.
That's awesome. I want to ask you one final thing, and then I'll let everybody, figure out how to get a hold of you. Looking back on your 20 plus year career, what's your absolute favorite thing you've done?
Oh man, that is a loaded question.
It
The
is.
favorite thing I've done. Yeah. Um, I have maybe, I could count on maybe not even one hand the days that I did not enjoy um, in my job, that I would not want to repeat again. I was just been blessed to have a really great career. I don't know that there's one kind of highlight. Um, it's funny, the things that after you look back on your career and you're explaining it to people who aren't a cop, and I go, yeah, in the name of training, I've been punched in the face and pepper sprayed and hit with tear gas and all kinds of um, launchable munitions, and I've been choked unconscious and lit on fire, and all these kind of things. Of course, and not all on the same day, thankfully. But I think for me, it's really the instructor stuff. When I have had officers come back to me and go, "Hey, let me tell you about an incident that I was in," and they start telling the story and about what they did, and they go, "You know what? It was just like training, and I knew what to do," and and I just go, "Yes, that means that what I was doing, I got it right," because we don't always get it right, but I got it right with this person in this circumstance, and that kind of keeps you going. So I think that would be some of the highlights in my career is officers coming back and telling me about their incident and telling me how they could hear my voice in their ear, and they were doing what they were trained to do, and it all worked out. So as soon as we end this podcast, I'll think of some other cool thing. And yeah, I've had some cool things. When we had UFC in town, I got to sit right behind the Rain Girls, and I got to present a cowboy hat to Dana White, and met all kinds of celebrities and politicians, and doing VIP protection and stuff. But the stuff that I really find valuable was how I had an impact on people as one of their trainers.
That's awesome. I love that. So, if somebody wants to get a hold of Dan Fraser, either to network or to bring you down for training, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you? And where can they get your book?
Well, they can. So I've got two websites: one for the book, one for my my courses and training, which is FraserTrainingSolutions.com. You can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Just to look for Dan Fraser. My book, Kickass Presentations, and I realize I'm getting a ton of glare. For those watching on the video, it looks like there's some type of nuclear explosion outside, and I don't know, maybe not yet. Not yet. It's just all of a sudden the sun came out and is glaring off of a wall outside. But I've got my book here, Kickass Presentations. Wow audiences with PowerPoint slides that click, humor that's quick, and messages that stick. You can get this from Amazon. You can get it from Barnes and Noble. In Canada, you can order it from Chapters Indigo. And I've got a course that goes along with it called Kickass Presentations, a 2-day instructor development course for those who want to get better at the craft of standing in front of a room and imparting knowledge.
Awesome. Well, Dan, I'll definitely have you back, and so then we'll get the cool story the second time you're back.
All right, sounds good. No,
Dan,
thanks, Brent. I appreciate it. You're doing good stuff with this podcast, so thanks so much for having me on.
Well, it's my pleasure to have you on this. So, thank you for coming, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Sounds good.